Garbage was dumped over the alien girl, leaving her unclothed in shame until a human rescued her.
The sulfur vents never stopped on Dragatol. They exhaled low clouds that mixed with smoke from food stalls, creating a constant haze that clung to hair and skin. The market square was packed. Miners off shift, vendors shouting for attention, children weaving between carts. It was loud, restless, and smelled of burnt oil, sweat, and old fruit. At the center of the square, the crowd tightened into a circle. Voices rose, not in trade, but in mockery. They shoved her forward. Nelari Kalesh stumbled hard, catching herself on the stone floor. Garbage struck her shoulder before she could stand. A second hit her hip. She was already shaking, but she forced her hands to shield herself, forced her head down to hide her face. Her long silver-white hair hung in knots over her cheeks, but it didn't cover the humiliation. She had been a xenobiologist once, proud of her work in studying soil toxins for reclamation projects, a name known in universities. But 2 months ago, after a contract dispute with an executive family, she was accused of falsifying data. Overnight, she went from respected to despised. On Dragatol, an accusation was as good as a conviction. Today, she was nothing but an object for the mob to punish. Her green skin, luminous under clean light, was now streaked with dirt and bruises. Her last garment, already torn, was ripped away by a man who grinned as he threw it into the air. The crowd roared with laughter. Nelari locked her teeth together, refusing to beg. But inside, her chest burned with panic. If I break here, they win. If I scream, they'll throw more. Her pulse hammered in her ears, and her body trembled so violently she could hardly keep her arms crossed. I was a scientist. I was someone. How did it come to this? From the far edge of the square, Marcus Thane watched. He had not planned to stop here. His assignment was simple: audit freight routes for guild compliance, confirm the next shipment through Docking Bay 12, and return before curfew. He hated the market. Too much noise, too many chances for petty disputes to spill into violence. But he had cut through the square for efficiency. That was his habit, efficiency in everything. Marcus was in his late 30s, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, with a trimmed beard. Years ago, he'd been a colonial scout, trained to survive in hostile terrain, trained to read a situation fast and act faster. He had left that life for inspection work. Less killing, more paperwork. Still disciplined, still armed with presence, but he wanted quiet. He had told himself he no longer cared about other people's cruelty. On Dragatol, it didn't last long if he cared too much. But he cared now. The alien woman in the square wasn't a stranger to him. He had seen her name in reports once, tied to soil reclamation research. He remembered because her work had kept miners alive in poison shafts. Seeing her shoved through filth like a spectacle scraped against something in him he thought was buried. The crowd was escalating. A fruit burst against her leg, staining her skin. A boy climbed onto a crate to throw from higher up. An older woman yelled "Spy," while pointing at her like she was less than an animal. Marcus stepped forward. Each move was deliberate. He didn't shout. He didn't rush. His boots scraped against the stone, and people turned because they felt the shift in presence. He was tall, steady, and carried himself like a man who wouldn't blink first. His weathered coat swung at his sides. The guild inspector badge clipped low but visible. The ringleader, a vendor with burned scars down her arms, froze mid-throw as Marcus reached her. He caught her wrist. His grip wasn't rough, but it didn't leave space to argue. "Drop it," he said. His voice was calm, level, the kind of tone that carried authority without needing volume. The pulp slipped from her hand. "This isn't your route," she spat, trying to regain face. "It is when waste violations happen in front of me," Marcus replied. He raised the inspection cam, strapped to his knuckle, and clicked it. The sound was sharp. Everyone knew the meaning. Fines, reports, licenses suspended. On Dragatol, a week without trade could ruin you. The laughter thinned. The boys lowered their arms. The crowd shifted uneasily. Marcus removed his coat. He walked to the alien woman without hesitation. She straightened slightly as he neared, not trusting him, not trusting anyone, but too drained to resist. He set the heavy fabric across her shoulders, hiding her trembling body. She gripped it tightly, eyes darting up at him with suspicion. "Can you walk?" he asked quietly. She swallowed hard. "I am standing." Her voice was hoarse but steady. "Walk with me," he said. The vendor tried one last time. "She doesn't deserve your pity. She deceived the colony." Marcus turned his head, met her eyes, and clicked the cam again. No words, just the reminder that her stall could close before the day ended. She looked away. Nellari took a step, then another, barefoot on the dirty floor. Marcus moved a half pace ahead, parting the crowd with nothing but his presence. No one reached for her again. The corridor swallowed them, both as the market noise dimmed to a dull hum. Inside the service passage, the air cooled. The smell of sulfur and garbage faded, replaced by damp metal and rust. Pipes ran overhead, dripping occasionally onto the cracked floor. Nellari's hands clutched the coat so tightly her knuckles whitened. She finally looked at him directly, eyes wide with fear and suspicion. "Why?" she whispered. Marcus kept walking, his tone unchanged. "Because no one else would." Her chest tightened. Part of her wanted to believe him, to let go, to collapse in his safety. But she had trusted once before and been ruined. She tightened the coat instead and forced herself upright. "Don't rely on him. Don't rely on anyone." They reached a dented door, marked "Com Relay Out." Marcus pulled a chipped fob from his pocket, unlocked it, and held it open. "You'll get food and water," he said. "After that, you decide." Her breath shook in her throat. Every instinct screamed that safety never came without a cost. But her body trembled from hunger and cold. She stepped inside. Marcus followed, shutting the door behind them. For the first time in weeks, Nellari wasn't on display. But she wasn't free yet. Not from shame, not from fear, not from the doubt in her own mind. Marcus watched her from across the room, calm, steady, waiting. He hadn't planned this. His mission had been paperwork, not rescue. But now, with the image of the crowd burned into him, he knew one thing. Leaving her there hadn't been an option. The comms room smelled of dust, cold metal, and stale paper. Its walls were lined with silent consoles, their panels cracked, their lights long dead. A kettle rested on a small two-burner stove against the wall, the only object here that felt alive. The air was quieter than the market, though the faint hum of pipes overhead reminded them both that Dragatol was never truly silent. Nellari stood just inside the doorway, her back pressed to the wall, her fingers gripping Marcus's coat as if letting go would strip her bare again. The weight of the fabric steadied her, but her mind spun in a storm of doubt. Why had this man intervened? What did he expect in return? No one gave kindness here without cost. Marcus moved around the room in controlled, deliberate steps. He placed a tin basin on the counter, filled it halfway from the cracked sink, and set a ration tin near the stove. He didn't look at her when he spoke. "Water's clean enough for washing. Food will take a few minutes." His calm tone made her tense more, not less. Men who acted calm often hid intentions. She studied his back, his posture, broad shoulders, precise movements, the trimmed beard of someone who kept control over every detail of himself. His coat had smelled faintly of iron and engine oil when he draped it over her. Sense of work, not perfume. She finally forced words out, her throat raw. "Why did you help me?" Marcus set the kettle on the flame. He paused, not for effect, but to answer carefully. "Because leaving you there wasn't an option. It wasn't enough. You don't know me. I don't need to," he said, turning just enough to meet her eyes. I saw what they were doing. That was enough. Her chest tightened. She wanted to believe him, but the memory of jeering faces still clung to her skin. She lowered her eyes. "Don't trust him. Don't trust anyone. But he didn't touch me like they did. He covered me." Marcus let the silence hold. He wasn't the type to fill it with empty assurances. He moved to a small storage shelf, pulled out a folded cloth, and placed it beside the basin. "Wash first. Eat after." Nellari hesitated. She wanted to scrub the filth from her skin, but undressing, exposing herself again, even partially, twisted her stomach with panic. She stayed still, watching him. He noticed. His tone didn't change, but his next move did. He stepped back from the counter, took the chair by the wall, and Saturday, do it at your pace. I won't interfere. That detail mattered. The distance. The choice. Slowly, Nellari walked to the basin. She kept the coat tight, balancing it around her shoulders while wetting the cloth. The water was lukewarm, enough to loosen the grime. She wiped her arms first, then her collarbone, flinching when bruises showed clearer under the emerald of her skin. Each mark reminded her of the crowd's hands, the tearing, the laughter. She bit her lip until the sting distracted her from the memory. Marcus stayed seated. His eyes didn't wander. He wasn't pretending she wasn't there. He was waiting. She noticed his hands, scarred across the knuckles, resting calmly on his knees. He looked like someone who had seen violence, but now restrained it like a tool locked away until needed. She broke the silence. "You're not from here. Your voice isn't local." "No," he said. "Outer colonies. I work the guild routes now." "You were military." It wasn't a question. His jaw tightened slightly. "Scout. Years ago. Different life. Why come here? Dragatol isn't a place people choose." He glanced at the stove flame. "Work sent me. Someone has to check shipments. Make sure miners get what they're owed. It isn't much, but it keeps me busy." Nellari frowned. She couldn't imagine anyone volunteering for such work. But she recognized something in him, discipline. The way he carried himself told her he was used to surviving in places like this. Just as she once had in laboratories where a wrong calculation could mean contamination or death. The kettle hissed. Marcus poured hot water into the ration tin, stirred it once, and set it on the counter. The smell of reheated stew filled the room, plain but comforting after weeks of hunger. Nellari finished washing her arms and neck, then lowered the cloth. She still clutched the coat to her chest, but she felt lighter. The grime was gone, even if the bruises remained. He stood, plated the food, and slid it onto the counter where she could reach it. Then he stepped back again. No urging, no commands. She stared at the plate, then at him. If he wanted control, he'd push me to eat, to thank him, to obey. He doesn't. Why? Her hunger clawed at her. She moved forward, took the fork, and ate slowly, forcing herself not to devour it too quickly. The first swallow brought a sting to her throat, her body's desperate reminder of how long it had been since her last real meal. Marcus spoke again, quieter this time. "What's your name?" She hesitated. Giving her name felt dangerous, but hiding it now seemed pointless. Nellari Kalesh. He nodded once, as if confirming what he already knew. Marcus Thane. Her eyes narrowed. "Your guild." "Inspector," he said. "Freight routes, nothing more. People don't risk themselves for strangers here. You must want something." Marcus leaned back in the chair. His expression didn't shift. "I want to finish my job and get through another day. Helping you doesn't change that." Her fork froze halfway to her mouth. His tone was steady, but there was something in it, an undercurrent of tiredness, of someone who had seen too many scenes like the square. She studied him, trying to find the crack in his armor. For now, she couldn't. She lowered her eyes and kept eating. The coat hung loose around her shoulders, but she didn't shrug it off. It wasn't just cover. It was proof, however fragile, that someone in this ruined colony had looked at her and chosen not to harm her. Marcus stayed seated, silent, watching her find her strength again, one bite at a time. The last of the stew disappeared slowly, each bite measured, as if Nellari feared the plate might vanish if she ate too quickly. When she set the fork down, her hand lingered over it, shaking slightly. Marcus noted it, but said nothing. He stayed in his chair against the wall, posture steady, eyes calm, letting her have the space she clearly wasn't used to. The room held silence, except for the hum of the pipes overhead. Nellari finally broke it, her voice low but sharper than before. Why did no one stop them? There were dozens, and yet they all stood and watched. Marcus didn't flinch, because cruelty is easier than responsibility. On Dragatol, people do what keeps them out of trouble. Today, it was simpler to throw fruit than to risk a fine or a fight. Her jaw tightened, and tomorrow it will happen again to someone else. Maybe, he said, unless someone decides to stand in the way. She studied him, searching for sarcasm, but his tone was matter of fact. That unsettled her more than empty comfort would have. Nellari pulled the coat tighter around her frame. You knew my name when I said it. You recognized me before I told you. Marcus didn't look surprised at her accusation. He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. Your research crossed my desk. Soil reclamation data. You helped keep miners alive in shafts where toxins would have burned their lungs. She blinked, caught off guard. The memory of those projects was still sharp. Months of field trials, endless hours of documenting results. The pride of proving her formulas could heal poisoned ground. Now it all felt like a different lifetime. That work was taken from me. They said I falsified results. They spread it until no one cared what I had actually done. Marcus's gaze didn't soften, but it steadied on her like a weight. I don't believe they strip you in the market because of a contract dispute. Someone wanted you ruined. Nellari's chest constricted. She hadn't said those words aloud before, not even to herself. Then you know I can't stay here. They'll come again. I know, Marcus said. His voice stayed calm, but his hand flexed once against his knee, a small tell of his own unease. But running tonight won't fix it. You'd starve before you reached another colony. You need strength first. She lowered her head. He was right, and that made it worse. She hated needing to rely on him. She hated the truth in his words. Still, something in her loosened, an unwilling admission that for the first time since her fall, she wasn't entirely alone. She lifted her eyes again, silver lilac under the dim light. Why do you care? You could have walked past. You could have finished your inspection and reported your numbers like everyone else. Marcus's answer came without hesitation. Because I've seen what happens when everyone looks away. I told myself I wouldn't be that man again. The firmness in his tone struck her. There was history there, something unspoken. She wanted to press, but he had already shifted his weight back, closing that door for now. She turned her focus inward. He has scars. He hides behind rules, but his eyes, they're steady because he's done this before. He knows what it costs to step in. Maybe he's carrying something heavier than he lets on. Her own doubts surged back. If he tires of me tomorrow, will I be back in the streets? Will he hand me over just to keep his peace? The questions gnawed at her, but her exhaustion pressed harder. Marcus broke the silence. There's a cot in the back room. It's clean. Use it. You'll be safer here tonight than anywhere else in this district. Nellari didn't move at first. Sleeping under another man's roof felt dangerous. Yet her body ached, her limbs heavy, her head pounding from hunger and stress. She studied him one last time. His posture hadn't shifted, still steady, still giving her space. If he wanted to hurt her, he'd had 100 chances already. She rose slowly, the coat wrapped tightly around her, and stepped toward the back room. The floor creaked beneath her bare feet. At the doorframe, she paused. If I wake and the coat is gone, I'll walk out and never return. Marcus nodded once. Fair. She turned away before he could see the tiny crack in her mask, the mix of relief and fear that clashed in her chest. Inside the small room, the cot was simple, just a mattress with a clean blanket tucked squarely. Nellari lowered herself onto it, her body rigid at first, then slowly sinking into the thin cushion. The coat stayed around her, pulled tight, the only shield she trusted. In the main room, Marcus sat again, eyes fixed on the dead console across from him. He didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't follow. He simply stayed awake, a silent guard while the colony outside continued its indifferent hum. For the first time in weeks, Nellari's eyes closed without the echo of jeering voices chasing her into sleep. Her last thought before darkness claimed her was sharp and uncertain. I don't know if I can trust him, but tonight I want to. The night passed in fragments. Nellari stirred often, her breathing shallow, caught in dreams that dragged her back to the square. Every time she shifted, the coat slipped, and she pulled it tighter, as if it were the last piece of dignity she still owned. Yet when morning came, she was still on the cot, not the street. No hands had torn the coat away. No doors had opened to throw her back into the crowd. She sat up slowly, her body sore, but her mind strangely clear. In the main room, Marcus was already awake. He hadn't used the second cot folded against the wall. Instead, he sat in the same chair where she'd left him, arms crossed, eyes half shut but alert. He hadn't slept. She realized it then. He had stayed awake to keep watch. The detail unsettled her because it meant he took her safety more seriously than she had herself. Her voice cracked with suspicion. "You didn't sleep." "Didn't need to," Marcus said, standing. He stretched his shoulders once and moved to the stove. "You made it through the night without being dragged back outside. That's the point." Nellari watched him pour water into the kettle, his movements controlled, efficient. Part of her wanted to accuse him of calculation, of keeping her alive because she served some hidden purpose. But another part, quieter and harder to ignore, recognized what she'd felt in the square. He hadn't gained anything from saving her. He had only put himself in danger. She forced her tone sharper than she felt. "You know, they'll notice I'm gone. They'll look for me." Marcus stirred the water, not glancing back. "They won't. Crowds on Dragatol don't look back. Yesterday, they were entertained. Today, they'll move on. That's how they survive here." The thought sickened her, the ease with which cruelty dissolved once the show ended. She hugged the coat closer. "And if they find me again, then they'll find me standing in the way again," he said simply. The certainty in his voice was too steady to dismiss. She searched for the trap. "Why? You still haven't answered. What is it you want?" Marcus finally turned, meeting her stare. His eyes were calm but heavy, carrying something she couldn't quite name. "I want to keep doing my job and walk home each night knowing I didn't step over another corpse in the street. That's it." It wasn't the answer she expected. Not charity, not pity, not a demand for obedience. Just a rule he'd made for himself. She held his gaze a moment longer, then looked away, unsettled by the possibility that he meant it. The kettle whistled. He set down 2 cups and poured the hot water over dry grain powder. The smell filled the room, bland but comforting. He slid 1 cup toward her. She hesitated, then took it. The warmth steadied her shaking hands. As she drank, she forced herself to ask the question that had gnawed at her since the square. "Do you believe the lies they told about me?" Marcus sipped, his face unreadable. "If I did, I would have left you there." She felt her throat tighten. Simple words, spoken without hesitation, hit harder than elaborate defenses ever could. For a moment, she didn't know how to respond. Marcus shifted, leaning against the counter now. "Your work, soil reclamation. That's not something you fake. I've seen those shafts you treated. Miners are alive because of it. That isn't fiction." Nellari blinked quickly, swallowing the sting in her eyes. They stripped it all away in one meeting. A forged report, a contract dispute, and suddenly my name meant nothing. I wasn't a scientist anymore, just a liar. "Your name still means something to me," Marcus said, steady. Her chest ached at the calm in his tone. He didn't say it with affection or pity. He said it like a fact. And fact had been missing from her life for too long. She drew the coat tighter. "If I stay here, if people learn I'm with you, won't that damage you? You work for the guild. You have rules to follow." Marcus exhaled through his nose, steady as ever. "Rules don't mean much when you let someone rot outside your door. If the guild wants to question me, they can find me. Until then, I decide who walks out of here alive." She studied him, searching for cracks. But his face was still, his voice grounded. No performance, no hidden scheme she could detect. Her thoughts circled on themselves, colliding with her exhaustion. "He says I'm safe here. He says he doesn't believe the lies. Then why can't I trust him? Why do I keep waiting for the price to show?" Marcus broke the silence again. "You can stay until you decide your next step. I'm not your keeper. You don't owe me anything." The words landed harder than he likely intended. Nellari wrapped the coat around her tighter, her mind twisting in conflict. For months, she had been treated as a possession. Now she was told she owed nothing, and the freedom terrified her as much as it comforted her. She rose from the cot slowly, her legs weak but steadier than the night before. "If I leave, you won't stop me?" Marcus shook his head once. "No, I'll make sure you're not followed. After that, it's your choice." She stood in the dim light of the room, her hair falling in tangled sheets over her shoulders, the coat swallowing her frame. For the first time since her downfall, someone had placed her fate back in her hands. It was a gift and a weight. She turned toward the door, then stopped. Her voice was quiet but sharp with lingering fear. "If I stay, if I trust you, don't use me." Don't treat me like they did. Marcus's reply came without hesitation. That's the one thing I'll never do. The certainty in his tone pressed against her defenses. She hated how much she wanted to believe it. She looked away, heart pounding. For the first time, staying didn't feel like defeat. It felt like a decision waiting to be made. The following days blurred together, but not in the way Nellari feared. No one came to the door. No crowd pressed into the corridor. The only sound beyond the walls was the muffled rhythm of the colony, the hiss of vents, the clank of carts, the occasional shout from miners trading shifts. Inside, the air felt different, still tense, but stable, as if the room itself held its breath while waiting to see what choice she would make. Nellari cleaned herself more thoroughly on the second day, using the basin until the water turned cloudy. When she stepped out from behind the divider Marcus had set up, the coat tied loosely at her waist, her hair freshly brushed, he didn't stare. His eyes flicked up once, acknowledged her, and then returned to the papers on his desk. That steadiness unsettled her more than any hungry gaze could. It meant he truly wasn't using her weakness against her. But the silence between them grew heavier, charged with something neither of them named. Every small brush of contact, his hand passing her a cup, her shoulder grazing his arm in the narrow kitchen, struck like static. She noticed the way his fingers lingered a second longer when he adjusted the chair for her, or how he stepped slightly aside whenever she walked past, giving her space but never retreating. By the third night, Nellari couldn't ignore the pull any longer. She lay on the cot, eyes open, listening to Marcus shift in the chair across the room. His breathing was steady, but she knew he wasn't asleep. She turned onto her side, the blanket slipping down, and whispered into the dark. "Why are you alone?" His voice came after a pause, low and even. "Because it's easier, less to lose." Easier than what? He didn't answer right away. She heard him shift again, the scrape of his boot against the floor. When he spoke, there was no embellishment. Then watching people you care about get destroyed because you couldn't stop it. The bluntness hit her like a weight. She wanted to press further, to ask who he had lost, but she saw the rigid line of his shoulders in the dim light and knew the door was closed. Still, the words told her more than silence ever could. He carried scars as deep as hers. She sat up slowly, the coat sliding down her arms. The cool air brushed her bare skin, and she pulled it back, holding it closed. "I'm not someone you can save," she said, voice trembling between defiance and confession. Marcus looked at her directly, his expression unchanged, but his eyes carried a sharp clarity. "I'm not trying to save you. I'm making sure you're not thrown away." The word struck deeper than she expected. For weeks, she had felt like nothing, discarded, humiliated, stripped of identity. To hear it said so plainly, without pity, shook her. She lowered her gaze, fingers gripping the coat tighter. "Why do you keep saying things I want to believe?" she whispered. "Because they're true," he said. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of fear, of longing, of questions neither of them knew how to ask. Nellari's chest ached with a war inside her, the instinct to run, to never trust again, and the desperate pull to lean into the first steady presence she'd known since her fall. When she finally lay back down, her heart wouldn't settle. She felt the heat of his gaze lingering, not predatory, but protective. And for the first time, she wondered if she might choose to stay not because she had no options, but because she wanted to. The night was long. Nellari didn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the marketplace again, the jeering faces, the filth, the tearing of fabric. But in between those memories, another image forced its way in. Marcus, stepping forward through the crowd, placing his coat around her shoulders without hesitation. That single act had planted itself in her mind, refusing to leave. She sat up from the cot just before dawn. The dim light from the vents outside seeped through the cracks in the shutters. Marcus was still awake, sitting in the chair near the stove, one hand resting on his knee, the other draped loosely over the armrest. His eyes were open, steady, as if he had been waiting for her to stir. "You don't sleep," she said softly. "Not when someone else might need the hours more than I do," he replied. His tone was calm, but there was no false heroism in it, only matter-of-fact certainty. Nalari's throat tightened. No one had ever guarded her like this. Not colleagues, not family, not even those who once claimed loyalty. She gripped the coat tighter around her body and forced herself to speak the words she had been choking on for days. I don't know how to exist like this. Every man who reached for me before wanted something. Payment, obedience, silence. You don't ask. You just sit there. Marcus shifted slightly forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His eyes didn't waver. Because trust isn't something you force. You decide if I've earned it. Her breath caught, and for a moment she hated him for making it sound so simple. Trust for her was a cliff edge. One step forward and she could fall to her ruin. But the steadiness in his voice pressed against the wall she had built. She stood slowly, bare feet against the cold floor, and walked toward him. The coat slipped slightly, exposing more of her shoulder, but she didn't pull it back up. She stopped just within arm's reach. Her pulse hammered in her throat. "If I asked you to touch me," she said, voice trembling but firm, "would you?" Marcus held her gaze, unflinching. "Only if you wanted me to." That answer, the restraint, the refusal to take what wasn't given, broke something inside her. She stepped closer, her body shaking, and guided his hand with her own until his palm rested gently against her bare arm. The warmth of his skin against hers sent a current through her chest, sharp and unfamiliar. She searched his face, waiting for hunger, for greed, for the look she had seen in the eyes of men who tore her dignity away. But his expression didn't change. He looked at her as if she were still whole. Her voice cracked, heavy with both fear and longing. "Don't let go yet." "I won't," he said quietly. His thumb brushed lightly against her arm. Not possessive, not demanding, but steady, grounding her in the present. Nalari closed her eyes for a brief moment. In that touch, she realized she wasn't trembling from shame anymore. The shaking was different, nerves giving way to something raw, something she hadn't dared feel since her life had collapsed. She opened her eyes again, meeting his dark, calm stare. Her words came out almost like a confession. "If I stay, it's not because I need to. It's because I choose to." Marcus gave the faintest nod. "Then let it be your choice. Not survival. Not mine. Yours." She inhaled shakily, her hand still holding his against her arm. For the first time, she let herself believe she wasn't property, wasn't a discarded scholar crawling for scraps. She was someone a man could stand beside without demand, without condition. Her lips parted as if to speak again, but no words came. Instead, she lowered her forehead to his shoulder, her body pressing against the steadiness of his frame. His other hand rose carefully, resting on her back, patient, solid, never pulling her closer than she allowed. For Nalari, it was more than touch. It was proof. She wasn't being taken, she was being held. And for Marcus, it was the moment he knew she wasn't just a woman he had rescued from a mob. She was someone he had chosen to protect, not because of obligation, but because she had chosen to let him. The silence in the room was no longer heavy. It was alive, charged with the fragile beginning of something both of them had feared to admit. The room was still, the dim glow of the stove casting a faint orange line across the floor. Nalari stayed pressed against Marcus's shoulder, her forehead resting there as if she were listening to the steadiness of his breathing. His hand remained on her back, warm, unmoving, patient. It wasn't a grip, it was presence, an anchor holding her in place without chains. Her mind swirled. This isn't survival anymore. I'm not asking for shelter, food, or his pity. I'm here because I want to be. The thought frightened her more than the memory of the crowd. Wanting meant risk, but she couldn't deny the pull inside her chest. The way his steadiness made the chaos in her mind quiet for the first time in weeks. She shifted slightly, pulling back just enough to look at him. His face was close, lit half by shadow, half by the faint stove light. His eyes didn't flicker with lust or calculation, only calm, focused on her as if nothing else existed in the colony outside these walls. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice almost breaking. "What happens if I let myself trust this?" "Trust you?" His jaw tightened faintly, not from irritation, but from weight. Then it means I carry that responsibility, and I don't take it lightly. The words dug deep into her. He wasn't promising her safety in grand gestures. He wasn't swearing undying love. He was telling her plainly, if she gave him trust, he would treat it as something sacred. That truth mattered more than any oath. Nalari's fingers tightened around his wrist. I've been touched before. Rough hands, cold eyes, always taking, never asking. She swallowed hard. If you touch me now, it has to be different. It has to mean something. Marcus leaned slightly closer, his voice low, steady. Then it won't happen unless you want it. Every step is yours to decide. The restraint in his tone, the discipline in his words, stripped away the last of her hesitation. She lifted her other hand, trembling but deliberate, and touched his face. Her palm brushed against the coarse line of his beard, her thumb against his cheekbone. His skin was warm, and his eyes never wavered from hers. She leaned in slowly, her breath shaking, until her lips brushed against his. It wasn't deep, not yet. It was a test. Her body tensed, waiting for him to seize control like the men before, waiting for the trap. But Marcus didn't move. He stayed still, letting her guide it. The realization broke through her chest like air after drowning. She pressed closer, her lips firmer now, and this time he responded. Not forceful, measured, patient, deliberate. His hand slid higher along her back, steady pressure grounding her, pulling her in with care instead of demand. The kiss lingered, building heat in the stillness of the room. Her body trembled, not from fear now, but from a wave of relief and desire colliding all at once. She pulled back slightly, gasping a soft breath, her silver lilac eyes wide. Marcus searched her face, voice rougher now, but still restrained. You're sure? Nalari nodded, her lips trembling with both fear and need. I've never been more sure. She kissed him again, harder this time, her hands sliding to the back of his neck. The coat slipped from her shoulders, pooling at her waist, revealing the luminous green of her skin in the faint light. Marcus's hand brushed the curve of her side, slow and careful, his touch confirming everything she had demanded. That this was different, that she was not being used, that she was choosing this. For the first time since her life had crumbled, Nalari felt whole. Not because he gave her worth, but because he allowed her to reclaim it herself. Their closeness wasn't survival anymore. It was desire. Mutual, deliberate, undeniable. The kiss deepened, but Marcus still held the same restraint, a discipline that kept his strength from overwhelming her. She melted into it, her body pressing against his as if to erase every trace of the shame burned into her skin by the crowd. When they finally broke apart, her voice came as a whisper, breathless but steady. I want to stay, not because I need to, because I choose you. Marcus exhaled slowly, his forehead resting lightly against hers. Then stay, and let it be ours, not theirs. In that moment, the walls of the ruined colony outside no longer mattered. Inside this small, dim room above a dead-calm shop, they had crossed the line from fear into something real. For both of them, it wasn't just a kiss. It was the start of belonging. The colony stirred awake with the grinding hum of cargo lifts and the clatter of vendors setting up their stalls. Outside, Dragatol was the same as it had always been. Sour air, smoke-thick alleys, a market where cruelty could erupt without warning. But inside the comms room above the dead shop, something had shifted. The silence no longer felt tense. It felt lived in, like the start of home. Nalari sat at the table, wearing Marcus's coat loosely tied around her waist. Beneath it, she had pieced together clothing from the scraps he'd given her, stitched fabric that clung awkwardly but covered her more than rags ever had. Her silver-white hair was brushed smooth now, falling in a sheet down her back, and her emerald skin, though still bruised, carried a faint, healthy glow that had been absent the night he found her. She ate slowly, no longer devouring the food with desperation, but pacing herself like someone who knew there would be another meal tomorrow. Each bite gave her space to think, and her thoughts circled the same question over and over. Is this real? Can it last? Marcus sat opposite her, his dark eyes steady as always. He wasn't watching her in hunger or judgment, but simply aware of every shift in her breathing, every glance at the window when her nerves flared, every small sign that her guard hadn't fully fallen. He had learned to notice such things long ago, during patrols where missing details meant losing lives. But now, he used that discipline differently, not to prepare for battle, but to keep her steady. "You're quieter today," he said finally. Nallari looked up, startled. "I'm thinking about leaving?" His tone was flat, not accusing, as though he truly wanted to know. She hesitated, then shook her head slowly. "No, about staying." Marcus didn't move. "That's your choice." The words carried weight. Weeks ago, she would have bristled at them, hearing only another trap disguised as freedom. But now they landed differently. She realized he meant them literally. He would not hold her here, nor chase her if she walked. The decision was hers, and the fact that it was hers made her heart pound harder than the kiss they had shared the night before. She set the fork down and pushed the plate slightly aside. "If I stay, it can't just be surviving. I won't be the hidden shame of this colony, waiting for the next mob. I need to live again, to be seen as myself, not as what they called me." Marcus leaned back, folding his arms across his chest. "And we make it so, together." The simplicity of his answer stunned her. No hesitation, no long argument, just a direct acceptance, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Nallari's throat tightened. "You don't even know what that means, how much damage has been done, how many will whisper if they see me with you." "I don't care who whispers," Marcus said, his voice low, firm. "I care about what you choose. If you want to live again, then that's what we'll build. I can't erase what happened, but I can make sure it doesn't define what comes next." She looked at him, searching for weakness, for any sign that he was telling her what she wanted to hear. But his expression stayed calm, his eyes locked on hers with the same unshakable steadiness that had silenced a mob with nothing more than presence. Her breath caught. For weeks she had been nothing but discarded flesh, humiliated and broken. Now, for the first time, she felt like someone worth building a life beside. She rose slowly, the coat slipping off her shoulders and pooling around her waist. She stepped around the table and stopped in front of him. Her hands trembled as she placed them on his chest, feeling the solid warmth beneath the rough fabric of his shirt. "I choose you," she said, her voice shaking but certain. "Not because I'm desperate, not because I'm afraid, but because when I look at you, I see someone who won't let me disappear." Marcus's jaw flexed faintly, and for the first time, she saw the emotion he usually buried, the weight he carried, the relief of hearing those words, the unspoken vow he had been holding since the moment he stepped into that square. He stood, towering slightly over her, and placed both hands gently on her face. His calloused thumbs brushed along her cheeks, grounding her in the present. "Then stay," he said, "not as a burden, not as a shadow. Stay as yourself." She leaned into him, her lips meeting his in a kiss that was deeper than the night before, filled with certainty instead of hesitation. His arms wrapped around her this time, not restraining, but encompassing, steady and protective, pulling her against him as if to shield her from the world beyond the door. The kiss lingered, and when they finally parted, she rested her forehead against his chest, hearing the slow rhythm of his heartbeat. For the first time in weeks, her body didn't tremble. Outside, the colony continued its indifferent routine. Vendors shouted, miners argued, pipes hissed. The cruelty of the market hadn't vanished. But in this small, dim room, Nallari Kalesh had found something untouched by all of it. A choice, a man who respected it, and a fragile beginning of a life built on trust rather than survival. Marcus kissed the top of her head, his hand steady on her back. "It's settled then," he said quietly. "Yes," she whispered. "It's settled." The story of the marketplace, of shame and humiliation, ended here. Not with her thrown away, but with her standing, her head high, beside the man who had refused to let her be discarded. For both of them, it wasn't rescue anymore. It was a home, and it was only the beginning.